Hello, and welcome to Edison TV. I'm Jyoti Prakash, healthcare analyst at Edison. I'm joined today by Dr. Marc Gitzinger, CEO, and Hernán Levett, CFO of BioVersys. BioVersys is a Swiss specialty biotech developing novel antibacterial therapies for serious multi-drug resistant infections. The company listed on the Swiss Stock Exchange in February 2025 and has a current market capitalization of over 140 million Swiss franc. Mark, Hernan, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us. Hi, Jyoti.
Hello, Mark. And just to kick off, antimicrobial resistance is a growing global challenge and a core focus for BioVersys. But before we get into the specifics of how BioVersys is positioned in this space, could you briefly introduce yourselves and your role at BioVersys?
Yes, happy to do so. My name is Marc Gitzinger, and I'm the CEO and co-founder of BioVersys, which the company we started really directly from my PhD thesis at the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology.
My name is Hernán Levett. I'm the Chief Financial Officer. I've been doing finance for about 30 years now, most of those within the pharma industry, 10 years with Novartis. And I've been Group CFO of public listed companies, both on NASDAQ and on the Swiss exchange.
Thank you both for that introduction. And moving on to BioVersys, the company has a broad pipeline spanning late and early stage assets. What programs do you see as the key value drivers for BioVersys today?
Yeah, so our pipeline has 4 programs overall, 2 in clinical development and 2 in preclinical development. We draw these programs actually from 2 different in-house technology platforms. The key value driver is, of course, today the most advanced asset that we have. It's called BV100. We developed that for very severe hospital-acquired infections, mainly pneumonia, bloodstream infections, caused by one of these very nasty gram-negative bacteria. The indication has very high mortality rates, and we bring this program currently into phase 3 clinical trials. So we're just starting up that phase 3 program, actually. For the rest of the pipeline, we have something in tuberculosis, partnered together with GSK. The program is called Alpibectir, which is currently in several clinical phase 2 trials. And then on the earlier stage pipeline, we have a preclinical asset focusing on dermatological diseases. It's called BV200, an antivirulence asset on the bacterial component that Staph aureus plays in atopic dermatitis. And lastly, we have BV500, which is an asset for non-tuberculosis mycobacteria in cystic fibrosis and COPD patients, which we recently also partnered with Shionogi, the Japanese global pharma company.
That's great. And sort of diving deeper into your lead asset, BV100, it's targeting carbapenem-resistant infections, and it's one of the highest unmet needs in the hospital setting. How does BV100 work, and what differentiates it from competition? And just to move on from that, how large you see the commercial opportunity in this space?
Yeah, so BV100 is really a great find in that sense. It's actually based on an active pharmaceutical ingredient that is already on the market since the mid-90s. But we identified that the product and this API actually has an activity on carbapenem-resistant Acinetobacter, which is linked to a new mode of action. The molecule actually opens an outer membrane porine of the bacteria and promotes its own entry. So that's a piece of the new mode of action. And then secondly, we also needed to create a new formulation for the molecule, because it currently only exists as an oral tablet and does not reach the concentrations and exposures that we need in patients to treat these very severe infections. So we needed to create a human suitable intravenous formulation, which we did, and have strong patent protection around it. So yeah, that's the product. It's really differentiated in the way from other molecules that work on Acinetobacter. Number one, because it overcomes all pre-existing resistance mechanisms for other classes. It is a really new class attacking the gram-negative bacteria at a new bacterial target, meaning that there's not expected to have pre-existing resistance, and also we haven't found it. So it really comes with a very strong activity against these bacteria and offers physicians later on a truly differentiated asset to treat the infection.
Interesting mechanism of action. And we would like to talk a little bit more about the clinical journey of BB100. It is approaching a major inflection point with the registrational phase 3 trial planned to start imminently. What gives you confidence in the study design, and what would be the most critical parameters for success?
Yeah, again, I think we have already conducted quite a comprehensive clinical program, including a phase 2 clinical trial in ventilator-associated pneumonia. Did a large phase 1 program overall with 7 different clinical phase 1 studies to characterize the drug also for its suitability in the ICU setting. Meaning that we checked for drug-drug interactions for patients with special interests like renally impaired and hepatic impaired patients. And all of this de-risked the molecule quite significantly. So we know that we have a safe and well-tolerated molecule, and the efficacy that we have seen in the phase 2 trials was really outstanding. We actually reduced all-cause mortality by 50%. And this combination now, moving into phase 3, we actually just expand the size for the phase 3. We don't change any doses, for instance, that we tested in the phase 2 clinical trial. The indication is pretty much the same. We expand a little bit beyond ventilator-associated pneumonia to also hospital-acquired pneumonia and bloodstream infections. But in general, the trial is really a larger version of the phase 2. And that gives us a lot of confidence that we hopefully don't expect any surprises during that trial.
Excellent. And we look forward to the initiation of the trial. And let's move on to your second clinical asset, alpibectir, which is targeting drug-resistant tuberculosis and has a unique mechanism of action. Can you briefly tell us about this asset and what role do you see it playing in the future treatment landscape of TB?
Yeah, this is a small molecule that we discovered, and it works with a new mode of action. We actually target bacterial transcriptional regulators, and in such, alpibectir is a co-drug combined with an existing tuberculosis drug that helps actually to reduce the effective dose of the existing TB drug and overcome its pre-existing resistance. So alpibectir is in the end combined with ethionamide. The positioning of, in short, how we call it Alp-E, is really interesting because it has one of the features that it is really highly bactericidal. So it kills the tuberculosis bacteria really fast. And that's a key feature in any TB drug regimen that you want to have. But due to drug resistance, the main drug that today does that, it's called isoniazid, is losing this ability more and more. And in such, Alp-E is beautifully positioned to potentially replace isoniazid even in first-line TB regimens. It certainly can be added to some of the newer second-line regimens that address multi-drug-resistant TB as one of the components that is killing the bacteria really fast. And we also have a positioning in tuberculosis meningitis, which is an extremely high unmet medical need because most antibiotics do not penetrate the blood-brain barrier, but Alp-E actually does and can really make a difference for patients there as well. So there's really quite a bit of different positioning possibilities going forward to make a lot of difference for patients here.
And alpibectir is being developed under a 50-50 partnership with GSK. Could you touch on the economics of this agreement and how the collaboration de-risks the program?
Yeah, GSK is already a long-term partner for us since 10 years, since the preclinical stages. We work with GSK very well together. Now, as probably expected in a tuberculosis drug development program, we receive a lot of co-funding from non-dilutive sources. Generally, we speak about 70 to 80% funding from non-dilutive sources, meaning government grants or NGO grants, etc., as an example. And then the rest of the cost is really split between GSK and us. We have together a joint team working on this program. addressing all the pieces from regulatory CMC to the clinical development. And then, our aim is to bring this drug forward through a phase 3 in the end and get it to market. And then, as you mentioned, the partnership is also such that we share all revenue of this program in the end, including the priority review voucher, for which tropical neglected diseases, meaning also tuberculosis, are eligible for.
Excellent. And BioVersys listed on the Swiss exchange in February 2025, raising 77 million Swiss franc. What were the key strategic drivers for going public at that stage? And how does this shape your capital allocation and partnering strategy?
Yeah, our strategy had primarily two objectives. We wanted to raise sufficient capital to take our lead asset BV100 to approval. Advance alpibectir, our second clinical stage asset, delivering phase 2 data, and under this collaboration that Mark alluded to with GSK, both for pulmonary TB and TB meningitis. And advance our preclinical candidates BV200 and BV500 as close as we can to be ready for the clinic by the end of 2027, right? So that's the capital and the way that we allocated the capital raised to the programs. The second objective was, of course, to expand the investment thesis to a broader number of investors and gain broader access to capital markets. So that then when we continue to think about building the future for BioVersys, that is already attainable to the company, right? As you have seen, we have a large pipeline that we can benefit from, and of course that will require additional capital later down the road. With regards to partnership, of course, having this kind of pipeline is super exciting, and you've seen that after the IPO already in July, we did reach that agreement with Shionogi under a research collaboration agreement. That then in turn, Shionogi will have the option to license the asset for a total consideration up to 479 million Swiss francs. And that was an important achievement post IPO for us. Naturally, the other angle with regards to partnership that investors should be aware of is the commercial strategy for BV100. We mentioned that China is an important marketplace for us. There are a lot of patients in great need. Acinetobacter happens to be the number one or the number two pathogen for hospital-acquired infections. So it's a true need for patients in China. So we're in that process of exploring who could be the best partner for us to bring the drug as fast as we can to these patients in need in China.
And you've guided for a 2025 end of the year cash position of around 80 million Swiss franc. What kind of operational runway does this provide given the upcoming advanced stage trials? And when does funding become a strategic consideration again for the company?
So from a timing point of view, the company is well financed into 2028. But I think more importantly, like I said, we raised the capital to take BV100 to approval and to progress significantly alpibectir. And just as a reminder to the investor community, alpibectir, we allocate part of the capital raise, but not all of it. A lot of the money that we put behind alpibectir comes from in the form of non-diluted funding, which the company has a great track record of doing so. And we also announced recently, support for the phase 2B for BV100 from the Wellcome Trust. So that, speaks to the company's capabilities around raising and attracting non-diluted funding, right? When do we think strategically funding will be the next window of opportunity? Naturally, for any biotech, raising capital is mission critical, right? That said, in our particular case, I think that will revolve around how we build the future post-approval of BV100, particularly when we think about how to build the organization for a commercial launch, right? A lot of that will be determined. You might have read recently that there has been important developments in Europe with regards to the reimbursement reforms. These are incentives that are specifically targeted towards anti-infective companies, and that reform may have significant incentives for companies like BioVersys. So that will dictate a lot how we think about the next funding opportunity and how we tackle the commercial buildup for the company.
Great. And shifting gears a bit towards the more macro level picture, in December 2025, the long awaited pharma legislation reforms package was announced for European Union. How do you think this will impact the broader anti-infective space in general and BioVersys in particular?
Yeah, Hernán has already a bit alluded to it in his last answer. Look, basically, we have the situation as the market used to be for novel antibiotics. You launch, and obviously, the more you sell volume, the better off you are. Look, for BV100, we think we have identified a niche indication that is really, really important. And in the traditional market environment, we feel that we have a peak sale potential of roughly 800 million on a global level, which for an antibiotic is clearly a really good market in the end. However, the reimbursement reforms that are being discussed in many countries, particularly the G7 and EU 27, are quite important. And the EU has made an interesting move now. They decided for a new vehicle that they call transferable exclusivity vouchers in Europe. These vouchers are being handed to companies that, register very early on, or ideally as first market, a new antibiotic in Europe. And upon that registration, the company would get, if eligible, with the priority pathogens that you address, etc., a transferable exclusivity voucher. And this voucher we can either use ourselves in another pipeline program or sell onwards, very much like priority review vouchers. But here the transferable exclusivity, as the name says, would allow the buyer, so potentially a pharma company, to extend the data exclusivity of a given product by 12 months. So delay the generic entry on the European market. That also results in a higher value for those vouchers. Current estimates are that these vouchers could be valued around 350 to 450 million. But it remains to be seen. A few of the details are now being put in legislation. We expect implementation not before 2027, which for BioVersys, we are still in time. We could be amongst the very early potential beneficiaries of such a new voucher. And I want to link this a little bit to the answer that Hernán gave beforehand. You understand that this drives a lot of the strategy on how would we launch BV100, how do we, see capital allocation and how much new capital would we potentially need? Because obviously, if such a voucher can be sold onwards, it's a significant injection of capital that would allow us to potentially think very differently about potential self-commercialization, for instance. And these are significant changes. They come on top of, and maybe I should mention that as well, additional changes that have already been made, like the UK system, where already the UK pays a so-called subscription model for new antibiotics, meaning volume independent and annual fixed fee for about 15 years for new priority antibiotics that are being registered in the UK. We have Germany and Italy that allowed for higher pricing of new antibiotics. I think the summary of this is that the global community has very much understood how important new antibiotics are for modern medicine and for our healthcare systems. And these changes in the reimbursement system are very important because they give a new value to novel drugs that now address highly drug-resistant infections, meaning less patients than, let's say, the genericized and very volume-driven older existing antibiotics. And this change is really important. It's about time, to be fair as well. But we see on a constant and consistent level these changes now being implemented. And we believe that this is, for us as BioVersys, a great opportunity, but generally speaking also for the investor community when looking into this very important space.
Very interesting indeed. And we actually look forward to see how things pan out on this front. And just to wrap up, Marc, what are the key catalysts over the next 12 to 18 months that you believe would be of most interest to investors?
Yeah, maybe you allow me to start with 2025. So a little view in the rear mirror, because it was really an exciting year for us. Besides our IPO on the Swiss Stock Exchange, we managed to onboard a new pharma partner in the form of Shionogi into our pipeline. We were able to get access to additional non-dilutive funding from the Wellcome Trust in quite a significant amount to help us support one piece of our phase 3 program for BV100, which is actually called a phase 2B, to generate more real-world evidence. We also got patents granted that were very key now also in China, meaning that we expand that patent protection to over 25 jurisdictions. And many smaller milestones like getting orphan drug designation for Alpibectir in Europe, etc. So very busy year, a very great year that also led then towards the end to the official initiation of our phase 3 program by the first submissions in the individual countries. And that is the transition to 26. 26 is now fully focused on clinical execution. We want to obviously conduct our phase 3, bring that up to speed. The real-world evidence trial that we call phase 2B in the same program. We expect towards the end of the year then the first drug safety monitoring boards for the phase 3. The phase 2B, which is an open label trial, might already be able to give first interim data. And in our second clinical asset, Alpibectir, also a lot happening. We're going to have a small readout for another phase 2AB that is currently still running and going seamless into recruitment of additional phase 2BC trials in pulmonary TB, and also initiate our tuberculosis meningitis trial. So you see lots of activity, lots of clinical work, which is key. In the end, we develop these medicines for patients. We access patients now in these trials, and we want to see the results and the difference that we make. So very excited. And then obviously there's always room for potential deals, for additional news flow around the early stage pipeline. This we'll have to see.
Great, and lots to look forward to. Marc, Hernán, thank you for this insightful discussion. For our audience keen to learn more about BioVersys, please visit the company website and tune into edisongroup.com for our ongoing coverage of the company. Thank you again.